All right. Um, Hello. Uh, Good morning. I'm gonna go do something actually. Um, just a second. Okay. Little tour. Um, so it's been a while since I've done one of these. And feeling good, like I should. Going around the neighborhood. Um, I've been away, and um, I had a beach vacation, and um, I realized, I thought for the longest time that I just wasn't a beach vacation kind of a person. I had not been privileged for most of my life to even do such a thing because I grew up in rural South Dakota. There aren't a lot of beaches, and there's not really lakes. There's not anything, and then I just didn't have the money to go anywhere where there was a beach, and I just thought I'm more of like a land mountain type person. The ocean always kind of weirded me out, but I've gotten open to it. And one of the things I realized that I like about this phase of my life is um, I have fair amounts of stress, which is something I'm working on. And like I saw some social media post thing the other day that said it was like five things. What was it? Five things about life that you wish you knew when you were early or something. Mark, what up, buddy? Good to see you. And it was something like, I wish I'd have known that happiness is a choice. And I know, Mark, even that you're here, I know that that kind of a thing could even be a little bit, yeah, this cat grew up in the back bush. Never thought I could enjoy myself in nature of the South. It is about intention. Yeah, a lot of it. Well, and happiness being a choice. And I think, as most things, I would say that's a yes and a no. And maybe happiness is about intention. If you set your intention and your goal on being happy, perhaps you can do that. And happiness, joyful, contentedness. Like, what does St. Paul say? I've learned in all things to be content, whether in want or in plenty, in prison, slave or free. It's basically that one's contentedness, their happiness, their peace is not reliant on their circumstance. It's an internal um, orientation, maybe, and resolution that you can have. That peace comes from the wellspring internally, receiving with meekness the implanted word, not necessarily waiting on your circumstances to change. Because if your peace is bound up and connected to your circumstance, well, you don't have your internal locus of control, your own agency with that. So anyhow, so there's stress, happiness, and I just realized I was pretty wound up before this beach vacation that I took, and then even so, what I realized about the beach, and this probably seems obvious to people who are beach people or who like beach culture or who go to beaches or people who have just cultivated a sense of. I was interacting with Kale and Nick Freerillian on X about this, but about just boredom. And this is connected to the written word thing. Um, I I'm not bored very much in my life, like basically ever. I'm usually trying to not be overwhelmed, trying to be at peace in the uh, what are the words that are coming? They're all negative. Onslaught, busyness, fullness of life that is my current stage. And in a sense, these are blessings. There's a lot of things going on, but a lot of the things that are going on in my life are things that in one way or another I elected. they're electives. So, but when you go to a beach, like that's the great thing about a beach. You're sitting on the beach. I happen to be on a beach on the ocean, um, and it's just a great place to just sit, to observe, to contemplate, to look at the water. You get hot, you go in the water. You get out of the water. You read a book. It's one of the fastest books I've ever read recently. So I read my first G.K. Chesterton book. I was reading it for my book club, and I was interacting with Matt C. and Nick about it quite a bit because I don't know, somehow I was happening to interact with them. And it was wonderful. I really loved it. It is funny because it made me think of Umberto Eco's line. I think it was in a postscript or some post editorial thing that he had after The Name of the Rose, where he said, the best thing an author can do after he's produced a work is to die. Like, we don't need your commentary on your own work. And which is an interesting aspect of any sort of creation or co-creation or artistry is how much of a factor is authorial intent. I don't know. It's a factor, but it's not necessarily a main factor because, for example, like I've said this about Cormac McCarthy, who's probably my favorite author. Like some of his last interviews before his recent death, memory eternal, like particularly the one with Lawrence Krauss, I was like, this is horrible. And I was just like, the things that you're saying are saddening me. And I feel like there's so much more beauty and wonder and hope in your books. Like, what's funny is a lot of people say Cormac McCarthy is kind of a nihilistic author, and I'm just like, I could not disagree more. But it's the same thing with G.K. Chesterton, The Man Who Was Thursday, because he has a note on the end of where he says essentially, many people, I was going to go get the book, but I'll just repeat it. Many people, think that his book is a portrayal of reality. And he's like, but you forget what an author has said, even perhaps in the title of his own work, which is, and this is getting at the authorial intent thing, which I think can be overrated. But he said, you have to remember that it's The Man Who Was Thursday, and it's, I think the subtext is just like a nightmare. And so he's saying, I don't think that this book is good or portrays reality necessarily. He's like, it's a nightmare. But I found myself at the end of the book. I mean, I need to read the last chapter again, the last couple chapters, especially before my book club, and to just get my head around some of the thoughts of the work and what I think about it. I think it's lovely. I think it's really good. It kind of reminded me of aspects of C.S. Lewis's Divine Dance toward the end of Perelandra. Or aspects of The Last Battle, C.S. Lewis's The Last Battle, Further Up and Further In, The Great Divorce. There are like heavenly visionary creation, final judgment imagery going on, and it's and I mean, it is terrifying in a sense, but it's terrifyingly beautiful because and then I want to connect in this piece of it because it's terrifyingly beautiful. A big something that I want to promote. I should have put this in the description, but I didn't beforehand. But there was a Lucas Voss conversation with my boy Jason Schwartzer, who, by the way, I'm going to find the link and put it in the chat. It was such a good talk. So Lucas is one of our. He's a Dutch. He's part of the European contingent of TLC, and they had this conversation recently, which was Plato, magic, karma, Hermes, and they talk about magic incantations. They talk about Vervaeke and Hermes stuff, and but one of the things I thought was most that I most liked about their conversation is they talked about good and evil, and even with angels or talking to Hermes or delving into magic, and is it good or bad? And if you grow up in kind of conservative evangelical or just conservative religious communities, I think they tend to operate within hard binaries, hard black and whites. This is good, this is evil. And the fact of Hermes is like he's a what were they talking about? Oh, Lucas was talking about his I think it's his master's thesis. I don't think that he got a PhD, but he got it in Egyptology. And he was talking about he did it on a god. I forget the name of the god that he did his thesis on. And he was saying it's a winged deity. And part of the symbolism and the imagery of winged deities is that they are they're fast moving. They fly. They are in the realm of the wind, of the spirit. They I suppose it's a little bit like a angels, messengers, winged, that they're not easily pinned down, because they're characterized with transformation, I think. And I'm not great at this stuff, but like it's not easy to put them into categories of black and white, and they're kind of trickster characters a lot of times. Hermes, is what's going on? Is it good or bad? Is he telling you the truth? Well, it's hard to know, and I think even in classic Christian angelology and demonology, I think those lines, or you think about Michael Heiser, Lord of Spirits, the divine panoply of gods, the divine council, like setting in Job. Whether or not angels or demons are good or bad, it is a complicated thing. And these are insider, this little corner conversations that we've had with a lot of our Jewish friends. Like Judaism, as far as I understand it, does not have clear lines between good and evil, even as it relates to God. There's that line in Isaiah that I often reference. I don't know the exact quote, but it's just like, I, the Lord your God, I create. Then it's the Hebrew word is ra, where it's chaos, disorder, evil. Like that word can mean a lot of things. Let me see. Let me look it up. Hebrew ra word. Ra. I think it's just R-A. Yeah, the Hebrew word ra means bad or evil. It can also mean disagreeable, malignant, unpleasant, or sad. It can be used to describe people, thoughts, deeds, or actions. It can also be used to describe things like land or water. Compare things such as worse than, just harmful acts, like rotten fruit, ugly cows. So I think there's just a lot more ambiguity with these things, and they talk about it really well in that podcast, the ambiguity of Ra. Okay. Why was I talking about? Why did I go into good and bad? Oh, that was just one of the best things from the. Would Hermes be invited to speak in your church sanctuary? I don't know. Arguably or debatably, he has. That's the idea of like internal family systems and David Bentley Hart's "We are gods and we are full of gods." Like, how sure can you be? I would propose that when most people are speaking, the vast majority of times when they're speaking or thinking, it's not them. It's some kind of a possession. That's even, I think of Jordan Peterson when he's talking about early on in his life, and he realized that most of what he said was dead wood, meaning it wasn't him. And I think it gets at that that things were speaking through him. He was possessed by many ideologies and ideas and projections and images and ways he wanted to be perceived. He wanted to be perceived as smart, or he wanted to win. That's a competition hierarchies, zero-sum competition hierarchies. I think all those things are spirits, principalities. I don't think. I actually would say that the only time that you are truly the one that's speaking, or who could be invited to speak in any sanctuary, is when you're speaking from the univocal voice who is your true self, who is your white stone name. And how often am I speaking from that place, from that seat, from the core of my being, the only thing that is true, good, and beautiful within me, which is the image of God, the icon of God, Christ in me. I don't know. Hopefully more and more, but not often. Even anytime you're you're speaking, you could be speaking from many different kind of Christian ideological things, but because some people so quickly associate the label to the thing. Oh gosh, what is that about labels that just recently came up? I feel like there was some interaction that I just had about labels that was fantastic. Oh, anyhow, I don't want to get too far afield with that, but so that conversation was really good with Jason, and then the other thing I want to talk about is recently. So I read The Man Who Was Thursday. It was fantastic. The other thing that I started reading, and it's been a very slow read, is this book. Good grief. Chucky Williams. Man, this book is baller. I don't know. I mean, I haven't delved into a lot of the other Inklings for a long time. My first Inkling was Lewis. I got into Tolkien, obviously, with Lord of the Rings and Hobbit and Silmarillion, all that stuff. I've not read any of the letters of Tolkien, but I have some. I have that book, a collection of his letters that someone gave me that I'll probably read at some point. I've read the most of Lewis, and Barfield. I've read some of, primarily saving the sections from Saving the Appearances, and I love Barfield, the way that he thinks. But like this guy, like I read the back of it to someone, like they say, Charles Williams, who died in the summer of 1945 at the age of 59, was a man of unusual genius in several kinds of writing. His work included poetry, drama, literary criticism, and several important volumes in the field of religion and theology, and in addition, a series of 7 remarkable novels. These novels have been constantly asked for by a small but enthusiastic public. There is nothing in fiction quite like them. They may be described as supernatural thrillers, quote, popular novels, in the best sense, by a man who had something important and quite individual to say. Individual. That's he had his own unique voice. He had discovered his own unique sacred magic, word to the world. When we say thrillers, we mean that their plots are adventurous and breathless. They're scenes, sometimes entrancing and sometimes horrifying. And when we say, quote, supernatural, we mean that Williams had a real experience of the supernatural world to communicate. Although I don't like the word supernatural because it's even, who was that? Oh, it was a little clip from Jonathan Demir did my natal birth chart. And then he made a video, which he may make public at some point. I'm not sure. We're talking about that. But one of the clips that he put in there was somebody that was talking about angels too. And he was just saying like that to even think of angels as supernatural, like they're created beings. So they're part of the created order. And so like natural and supernatural is putting these categories on things, which are, they're just, all models are false, some are useful. And so the model of natural supernatural is just like it can fall into a binary that I don't even really see. Like I think just like everything is filled with gods, everything that you think is natural and material is filled with gods too. It's what makes it exist. It's consciousness. It's the hard problem of all perception. I think there are gods that are connected to everything. I think a lot of like Native American spirituality saw the world this way, and I think it's accurate. Probably like most pre-enlightenment people thought this way. That's that idea of like not having a division in the way that you see things. Which I guess, so anyhow, Charles Williams is fantastic. I've been reading this very slowly because it's dense. It's very good. And it's kind of just going through the history of the church, but what it really, and it's talking about, a lot of it is about reconciliation. It has this great quote about reconciliation, which is like the main work of the church. Where is it? Because I've been reading this for hours. So anyhow, it's very good. I'm going to be talking a lot more about this in the future because I said this on X, and I think um, I I I'm just going to claim it. I'm going to claim it, say it, proclaim it, and say it, and pat myself on the back and break my arm doing it. Mainly because I need to increase shoulder flexibility because my shoulders are not very flexible. But I said a lot to Paul first, but like Owen Barfield and like now we've discovered people that know Barfield much better than me, like a lot of the Grail Country folks and Nate. Michael Lady took a pretty deep dive into Barfield. He's had a few conversations on Grail Country. There's many conversations on Randas United about Barfield, I'm sure. So Barfield's book, Saving the Appearances, back in the day, I was like, this is the book. Like The Meaning Crisis, Jordan Peterson, everything that's going on. Saving the Appearances is where it's at, because Saving the Appearances is essentially talking about the nature of perception. And once you start talking about the nature of perception, all the objectivism and rationalism of the modernist world goes to shit. All the criticisms of the merely postmodernist or like the merely critical aspects of postmodernism go to shit, because all that is rooted in well, and this is in some form of left-brained analytical rationalism or reason, which gets into something. If C Money is here, he may be here. C Money, if you're in the comments, let me know if you're here. But something that he wanted to talk about, which we could get into later once I finish up my fulfilling on the title, is the differences between rationality and reason. Because what did you say, C Money? He was texting me this morning. Then we were talking about other stuff. But what was it that you said? Shoot. You said, from what I gather, McGilchrist is of the opinion that reason alone is Ouroboros. So like the closed circle, right? And thus a good man used a proper ratio of reason, intuitions, imagination, etc. Vervaeke seems to speak as if rationality alone is circular and self-deceptive, again, the Ouroboros. And thus one needs to use rationality reasonably. Now, these things, I mean, this is the lightsaber of TLC, is what do you mean by that? And reason and rationality. I think if you're talking about like the kind of noetic intellect, I believe those are the terms historically in more ancient Greek thought, like the noetic intellect, or even church fathers, is that would not be an Ouroboros closed kind of rationality. That's not the kind of objectivism I'm talking about. When I talk about like objectivism, modernism, and why perception and Owen Barfield just crush it, is it's, and this is why I talk about the hard problem of perception, is when you objectify something, you divorce yourself from it. That's the subjective objective divide, right? Which a lot of it is post Cartesian dualism, mind body stuff. But you're always connected to that, because like anytime, in order to, this is the blind double slit experiment. Anytime you perceive something, you are involved in that act, of perception. In order to perceive anything, in order for perception to happen, there has to be a perceiver. And if you try to divorce the perceiver from the perception, you get into the problem of the double slit experiment, and that perception, viewing something, observation of something, changes the way that it behaves. So we've observed that empirically, scientifically, and that's an unavoidable part of reality, is that you can't divorce your knowledge and your epistemology of the world from yourself, which is why I talk about personalism. And why I say that the personalist knowing is the integration and the unity, the at one-ment of the 4 P's of knowing: propositional, perspectival, participatory. How come it's so hard to say all 4 of them? Propositional, perspectival, participatory. What's the other one? The idealism is the other half of the modernist coin. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think I'm really an idealist. Isn't who's that guy that's uh corner adjacent? Who's the big idealist guy? He's had some conversations with McGilchrist. Short hair, Middle Eastern looking guy. Procedural, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. This is how my wife likes my hair too. I don't normally spend a lot of time on personal appearance, as you can tell. I don't. But this is a haircut that she thinks I end up looking nicer in. Bernardo Castro, thank you, Rick. Exactly. Yeah. He talks a lot. I don't know that idealism is really the thing. Okay, let's get this back on track. Okay, so I gotta talk about Rhett and Link, and then I gotta open this up and then I gotta go for a run because I do not save my appearances. But I did. I got a new haircut for the vacation, and then and I do have this just sweet ass jacket that I got recently, and it's warmer here. It's like a waxed canvas jacket from Bradley Mountain. It's a great company, and then made in America, and then the inside, and it's got a wool liner. Perfect. God, we got to get a little fashion talk in here for my the people in the TLC who like the fashion talk, which is basically me and my boy Nathaniel. I think maybe Hezi, maybe some of the ladies. Why do they hate me? Is it my ladies or I drive a Mercedes? Hey. So rationality, reason. Shit. What was I saying before that? Anyhow, I'm going back to just the reconciliation of the written word. So for me, I've spoken a lot about in the corner about objectivism, Socrates' lament of the written word, where he said, it will make us forget. And memory is the purveyor of reason. That's a great quote. Samuel Johnson, it's very true. Memory is the purveyor of reason. So memory sets the table for reason, which I think gets at a lot of stuff Origen was talking about. Because memory has this kind of eternal recursion where you are, and I think memory operates outside of time. This book also does a lot of has a lot of things. It talks about the church reconciling creation and God with time itself, which is phenomenal. Like it's just I can barely understand what's happening. This is how I know these books are really good, and Saving the Appearances was similar to me. It's like, and this is my kind of gold medal detector that I think I have. Like when I read Saving the Appearances, I was just like, I don't know that I barely understand what's happening in this book, but I know that it's good and it's right, and there's much gold in them hills, This book is the same thing. Like I read it and I'm just like, holy cow, the dude is brilliant. And I know and I'm reading it slowly, and I'm probably gonna have to read it multiple times. But it's very, very good. Maybe my boy, I told Steven D20 that he should check it out because it's related to a lot of his Christian physicalism and quantum mechanics stuff that he was doing, I think, as it relates to time. But so this is what I realized sitting on beaches, not getting bored, but just having time to meditate, contemplate. You maybe go, you maybe do a little snorkeling, maybe do some swimming, and you're sitting there, you get in the water, you get hot, you come back out, you sit there, you read. But I'm not doing anything. I'm not watching YouTube videos. I'm not doing household chores. I'm not running around in my car. I'm not distracted by all the different things in my life I have to keep track of. I'm just sitting there. And the only thing, this is the beautiful part about beaches that I never realized, and it's probably a little bit of my Protestant work ethic stuff, is it's wonderful to have nothing to do. It's wonderful. Because then I found I could actually read. It's really hard for me to read in my modern life because even in my house, there's always stuff to do. Or when I'm running around doing work, it's hard for me to calm down. And I realized it took me like a day and a half of significant amounts of time just sitting on the beach before I could just kind of relax. Because I'm so wound up of just all the things that need to happen all the time. And it just took me that long to just like, I don't know, there's probably ways you could talk about like serotonin, dopamine to just like, exhale. And it was lovely. So I read G.K. Chesterton, and I don't know, like that book in a couple days. It's not that long of a book, which was lovely. I also had a lot of time to just sit there and think about it, to ruminate on it, because that's an important part of reading to me, which I've probably talked about this book, but it's one of the best books that I've ever read, and it's been seminal. This is the thing. This is my love affair with books, right? So anyhow, Mortimer Adler, How to Read a Book, and he says there's like 4 levels to reading a book. And he said in a lot of times, even in graduate studies or PhD studies, a lot of times people don't even get beyond the second or the third. Because to really read a book well, and this has to do with literacy, it's not just like sounding out words and saying things and reading sentences. Big part of literacy is comprehension. Like even if you do a test or an SAT, like being able to, like, what was the paragraph about that you just read? And it's not only just pull, parrot, repeating what was said, regurgitating information that's in a book. This is the difference between information and meaning. Information is meaningless. It takes a person and a perceiver and a meaning maker, because the person is the nexus and the locus of all meaning, to make information meaningful. Because you can have all the information in the world, it doesn't tell you what it means. Only a person can tell you what information means, which is why I don't know that AI has the ability to become conscious. The only way I'm open to it is Jason Schwartzer's, if its creators are willing to die for it, because that's a pattern I recognize. And I think that's how we become fully human and fully alive, is that our creator died for us. And I don't know, that's a powerful pattern. It's a powerful magic. It's a deep magic, perhaps. So in this corner, anyhow, I've talked a lot about propositional tyranny, divided man, despirited breath is one of my Luke-isms, which has to do with Socrates' lament of the written word. And so memory is the purveyor of reason. And Socrates said, well, the written word will make you forget because you outsource your agency, your memory to the written word. And then you can't remember yourself. Even thoughts of like mind palaces, idea palaces. People used to be able to memorize like the entire Bible. People would memorize entire books, plays, whatever. But if you stop exercising that faculty, it will atrophy. It will degenerate, and then you won't have those abilities anymore. And so I think in one hand, Socrates is right, is that writing made us forget, but I don't think it has to. This is the identity of identity and not non-identity, and Christologic, Christ the eternal Tao, that there is truth and untruth, there is light and dark, there is truth, and error in anything. There is potency, order and chaos, being, non-being. All those things are related, relationally related. All opposites have a higher unity that resolves the difference. And I think in the same way that the written word can make you forget, it can also make you remember in a lot of ways. And I do have a strange love affair for books, because even if I just go through the kind of story of my life, some of the significant signposts of my intellectual development and personal development are books. I'll talk about Mortimer Adler's How to Read a Book. I'll talk about Lilith and how that book changed my life. I could talk about C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity. I could talk about Blue Like Jazz. I could talk about Rob Bell books that I've read. I could talk about Lewis's Space Trilogy, which is one of the books that is some of the books, Ransom Trilogy, that have most deeply formed me. Silence is a book that changed my life. Graham Greene's The Power and the Glory is a book that changed my life. Cormac McCarthy's books have deeply affected me. I deeply, deeply love books. Barfield, this book. And I feel like if you read a book at the levels that Mortimer Adler's talking about and how to read a book, and you're asking questions of the text, and you're engaging with the text, and you're maybe even writing in a book, which some people consider to be sacrilege. I don't. You could get a notebook where you could just write thoughts in on the side of the book. But my memory often works related to books, which is why I don't mind podcasts and audiobooks and things like that. But very often when it comes to ideas and books, I see them visually. Like I imagistically picture sentences on pages, and then I'll just be like, where was it in that book? And then if I have the physical book, I can go back and I'm like, I remember, see, like I was just looking earlier to like that section where he talks about reconciliation being such a central part of Christianity. And I know that it's on the left side of the page at the end of a paragraph. And that's how I can like go back and find it. Where does it talk about that? Now I want to do it just to like give an evidence of what I'm talking about. The reconciliation with time. How far along was it that I was in? Anyhow, reconciliate. Here it is. There it is. Paragraph on the left of the page, end of the paragraph. So, see, this is, I'll just read this part, right? So, and the very condition of the faith was that deity was single, supreme, and different. Without difference, there was no reconciliation. And reconciliation was the supreme aim of faith. That's good. So you need difference. So this is like the problem of pain, the problem of the fall. Is it a problem? Well, you need it for reconciliation. You need it for forgiveness. You need death for rebirth. For transformation, there has to be a kind of death. You know, even when you're working out, you have to break down muscle fibers for them to build back better. Build back better. You know, when your bones grow, you got micro breaks, then they grow and lengthen and improve, and that's the pain of growth. And then you could go to Father John Bayer's talk with Sam Tiedemann, his most recent one, and they speak about it beautifully there. So all this is like I really love the written word, and I think in many ways it's I'm still not a fan of propositional tyranny. I don't think anyone is properly understood and of that spirit. I'm not a fan of hyper left-brained myopia. Because the right brain needs to be the master. But I am a fan of books. I am a fan of writing things down. Okay. I also want to talk about so to fill in my title of Rhett Link and Rainn Wilson. So this came up recently where I saw, and I listened to it last night. But they had a conversation, and Rhett Link a number of years ago, they came out that they like were leaving the faith or deconstructing or doing that usual thing, you know, and it was so hot right then. And Sam Tiedemann and Jeff P. and I had a conversation about our Rhett Link traders. And a lot of it was about how, like, when people deconstruct or they no longer self-identify as Christians, a lot of the reaction to that can be kind of a simplistic tribal response to when you leave a group and you leave a certain identity marker. It can be felt as a sense of betrayal, when really, like, it's just a label, you know, like when Rhett and Link, and it's somewhat like this, the problem with self-identity labels is like how much can you choose your stripes, and how much does your kind of intellectual adjectival labeling of what is, how much does that relate to reality and bodies? Because I think a lot of times bodies and body keeping the score and bodies being a memory of your actions in the world is such a stronger metric or barometer of where you're really at, because what it means to believe something is to act as if. And when you act as if, the memory of what you have acted as if is in your body. Your body keeps the score. It retains the memory of your actions. You could argue that's what your body is. Your body is a tradition. It's the tradition. It's the memory, the body of the conscious inactions of your intellect, I suppose, of your intellect and your will and your imagination. And then when you enact those things, when all those things come together, you act upon them, and your body is the memory of that agency, of that act. So like Rhett and Link, are they like when you take a self-identify, when they were just like, we're no longer Christians, at most, and I've said this about propositional knowledge before, is at most it is aspirational. It's potential, again, because that's the dualism of potency and actuality, right? In order for something to actualize, there has to be the potency there, and then you can actualize it. Being and becoming, like those are two sides of the same coin. Order and chaos, like people could talk about the Big Bang, the singularity of before the Big Bang, but it wasn't a true nothingness, because true nothingness would have no potency, and you couldn't even say anything about it, because true absolute nothingness is the same as everythingness. So like a singularity that was potent before the Big Bang, to even talk about before, you have to have potency. But then when it had actuality, like why something other than nothing? Because there's a reciprocity between non-being and being. There's a relationship, which is the implicit medium and the matrix behind the two things. And so like when someone says I'm a Christian or I'm a non-Christian, it at most it's a, or anything, any label, at most it's an aspirational thing, at least when it's ideological, like I'm a man has a little bit more of a, but that's a embodied thing. There's a memory that even transcends my will about that, because like no matter how much I will and change things. Oh, I also want to do a talk about Conclave. Man, the movie Conclave was fantastic. Did anybody in here put in the comments if you saw Conclave? Because no spoiler alerts, but that was a great movie. It was very well done in many ways. So Rhett Link Traders, that's an old Randos video, I think from like 4 or 5 years ago. It was when Sam was kind of a newbie in the corner. Pretty new, pretty fresh. As the last of the OG Randos, the last of the apostles. And then this conversation with Rainn is fascinating. Like there's a quote that I want to share from the Lucas Voss conversation with. I sent this out in like a, what do you call it? Is there no longer tweets? But here's a good one from Loop, whoever this Lupe guy is. Loop Des. All faith is visionary. Amen. But there's a couple of quotes I put in here. So they said in that conversation, Lucas said, you have to open yourself up to learn. You can't open yourself up if you label something as bad. So if you automatically say something is bad, can you be open to it being a good? The cave you fear to enter holds the answer that you seek, or it may hold the answer that you seek. Sometimes salvation is found outside the safety of the city walls. And sometimes, the hero's journey is sometimes to go outside the city walls to get the gold from the dragon, who's bad, right? But then you could say the gold is good, and so you have to perceive some good in there, the gold, some worth getting, to face the bad or the chaos or the disorder or the outside or the unknown. There has to be some kind of faith to enter the unknown, that it is that what looks. What you meant for evil, God meant for good. There sometimes is a kind of reconciliation and redemption and salvation in what is initially perceived as bad. Because if you automatically close yourself off in a left brain way, in a labeling way, to like bad, 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 you have no openness for the error to manifest in the right brain to correct and transform your thinking. Unless you just assume that everything that you're thinking right now is absolutely correct, but then you're in this closed Ouroboros of a kind of systematic, encapsulated confessionalist ideological possession. So that's a great quote. And then connected to all these things and the Rainn Wilson conversation and Rhett Link, because one of the things they said at the very end of the conversation, so Jeff P said one of the takeaways from the conversation was that I think Link said he caught Rhett's deconstruction. So there was a mimetic thing there. Within love, Rhett started deconstructing, and then Link caught it. So that's a takeaway. They also said at the end of the conversation that one of the things they've been so blessed with is that just in them recording earnestly and authentically their own friendship, authenticity, right? They're probably about my age. So they're probably like elder millennials. So it's the age of authenticity, right? Through their authentic vlogging and all their mythical kingdom empire that they've created on YouTube and elsewhere. Other people were able to enter into their friendship and be like, what did he say? Like a third party into their friendship, but only in a consumeristic, voyeuristic kind of a way. What the TLC does differently than what Rhett and Link do, and that most podcasts do, because you're just observing them. And what I'm going to do a little bit when I open up this stream is we allow people to break the fourth wall. And you're not just sitting here observing me. You're not just sitting here watching me. You're not just consuming me. You have the invitation in my hospitality to enter into conversation and dialogue with me, to ask questions, to be asked questions of. That's a stupid sentence. To open yourself up to be asked questions, to dialogos, to communication. And hopefully, I saw Chezi was in here. Hopefully TLC is the kind of brave space where, to quote my genius level friend Rod, this was a great quote that I put on X too. The quality of friendship is inversely correlated to the number of topics that are off the table. And I find that to be true. Like this is one of the reasons that I love TLC. It's one of the reasons that I love books like this, is like when I'm reading someone like Charles Williams, I'm just like I know that this guy, and this may seem like a hubristic thing, but I don't give a shit because I'm like Timothée Chalamet and I want to be a luminary. When I read a book like this, I'm just like, this guy he's probably beyond me in levels of capacity or genius. Maybe not. Who knows? Like, who knows what you're capable of, what anyone is capable of. And we all have different gifts in God's varied grace, right? So like intellect itself is not a virtue. I've said that many times. It doesn't matter. But like, I like ideas. I like philosophy. I like conversations. And this guy is like, you want to level up? Like, this guy's not messing around. Like, this is a book. This is not a smart, dumb book. Like, this is a book that like, I know that I can grow and benefit. There's seeds in this book that hopefully within the soil of myself can take root and form and add to the garden of my consciousness. Like, this guy is awesome. And it feels like, I said this once when I was reading a C.S. Lewis book to my wife, but I just said something in talking because I think ahead of my head. You know, it's this extemporaneous going off script kind of talking that I do, which I think is a kind of emergent form of social media, YouTube stuff, because it's just not scripted. It's kind of what podcasts are, like downstream of Rogan and the crew. You know, it's way different than mainstream media. I was like, I'm having a conversation with my friend C.S. Lewis. I said something like that, and my wife was just like, you think you're friends with C.S. Lewis? And like, I think you kind of can enter into a magical relationship with someone who is dead. It's a kind of necromancy. Like, again, is that kind of magic? When I'm reading a book by Charles Williams and I'm engaging with his ideas through this book, how is that not magic? It's just a magic that you're accustomed to. But the fact is, no man understands anything. When he understands that is his first tottering step, not towards understanding, but towards the capacity of one day understanding. George MacDonald Lilith. You only think you understand things because you're familiar with them. We are very used to books because we've had them for 500 years. But you don't think this is magic? You don't think this is magic? What the fuck are we talking? Of course it is. And it's lovely. It's lovely to be able to engage with these kinds of books. Can you be trapped in this world of the screen of set and possessed by it? Could you be possessed by books and just, that's what people said when novels started to become ubiquitous, is they're just like, people will just like only be reading books all day and they won't talk to people anymore, or people will just be stuck in their phones all day. Well, yeah, there's again, back to the identity of identity and non-identity. There's always light and dark in everything. So like this is a conversation and debate I have with my wife all the time. She's very nervous about these things and screens and this. And I used to be kind of a Luddite and now I do TLC stuff. And she's like, isn't that kind of hypocritical? And I'm like, well, I'm open to the truth outside the truth that I currently apprehend. I'm open to the reality or the potential that this medium and this kind of thing and TLC, and I think I've experienced this, despite what MJ says sometimes, that it is a conciliatory, redemptive. I think redemption and reconciliation is possible through this medium. And the same way I think it's possible through this medium. Can this make us forget? And can you get into like despirited breath through just regurgitating confessionalist tropes, or just repeating, like when someone goes to school and they're just repeating the books or like the words and quotes, and they're just like maybe aggregating quotes from all these different books that they've read. You know what else can do that? AI. Robots can do that. Do you have any thoughts? Do you have anything to add to it? It makes me think of that scene from Good Will Hunting where he's debating that guy in the bar, before How Do You Like Dim Apples? And he's saying like, oh yeah, I read that too, whatever page, and he's like, you're going to just quote some other obscure passage here like it's your own, pawn it off as your own, or do you have any unique thoughts to this? Meaning versus information. Robots and AI can accumulate information, whatever they have access to, and just repeat it and give it to you. That's not knowledge. True knowledge is embodied. It's Eucharistic. It has become you. You can take it into you. You can read this book, and then you can repeat. What does it mean? What does it mean to you? In your own words, what is he talking about? And I don't know. You have to be open. It's like I think there's actually a G.K. Chesterton quote. I used to say this all the time, or people used to quote it to me because I would talk about being open-minded. And they're just like, and there's a Chesterton, conservative types used to say to me, temperamentally conservative types, there's wisdom in conservatism. But the question is always like, what are you conserving? And this is where I like my priest who always said, the church can look very conservative and traditional from the outside, but you have to ask what you're conserving. And we're conserving hospitality. That's always the question with like Chesterton's fence and conservatism. But I think there's a Chesterton quote is something like, an open mouth or an open mind is like an open mouth and it's meant to close on something. But my retort to that, my pithy retort to G.K. Chesterton, and if you're up there and you can hear me or wherever you are, this is it. But a perpetually closed mouth is a disease. It's called lockjaw. If your mouth is always closed, you actually can't eat, because eating and living requires opening and closing, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. An open mind isn't a perpetually open mind, because that's like arbitrary nothingness. That's like everything. This is where I think you can be rooted in a tradition, and we have that in TLC. We have Jews, we have Christians of various tribes, we have atheists, we have agnostics. But hopefully it's a culture where you can have the kind of conversations that Rod was talking about, where you're open to the truth outside the truth you currently apprehend. You're actually open to changing your mind. Otherwise, there's no point in talking. If you're going to engage in a conversation about ideas with people who disagree with you, if you're not open to changing your mind, don't even have the conversation. There's no point. And I think Rhett and Link are actually at a point where they are open to reevaluating some things. And I think maybe through these emergent communities and things, we can maybe help. Maybe TLC can help. What do you think? All right, I'm going to look at some comments. I'm going to put this out. I'm going to pin it. And then I'm going to, how long have I've almost talked by myself for like an hour. Redonkulous. Stupid. Anyone feel free to come in and play. I'm going to look at comments after I pin the thing. All right. Managing moderators can support the channel in even more ways. Managing moderators. These users have the same capabilities as standard moderators, but in addition, they can manage blocked words and change chat modes in live. Man, who is a managing? Do I have any managing moderators? Who wants to be a managing moderator? That sounds like too much work to manage for me. All right, let's see some questions. Open to being wrong. That is not quite the same thing. Same thing as I see circles of communities, but they are siloed. But they're, I don't know. I always see that as like ideological groups or like political groups, and that's like that Rod quote, which is so good. Of what was it? Let's look at it. Get back to the Twitter box. Okay, listen. I just go to my own profile. I don't want to see your feed. Okay, I just want to see the things I said. The quality of friendship is inversely correlated to the number of topics that are off the table. Well, so this is like why TLC is kind of a brave space and why it's an estuary and why it needs to be diverse, is you have to have ideologically diverse camps. The last remaining acceptable form of bigotry is against those with whom you disagree. So that's the siloing, ideological siloing. You could do tribal, ethnic, cultural siloing. So you could be ethnocentric and just be like, people outside of my race or my culture are out of bounds. Like, what kind of bigotry is okay? Which kind of people are off limits? You know, sinners and tax collectors, are they off limits? Self-righteous Pharisees, are they off limits? Elder brothers, prodigals, who's off limits? I want to leave the 99 for the one. You tell me who's off limits. And like a good blue collar border collie blue heeler cross, I will sick him. I will go after him like a good cow dog, because I'm Hank the cow dog. All right. What else? What else? Comments. Ooh, Abe Books, Descent of the Dove. Nice find, Richard, on Abe Books for $8.53 used. Get them all top, because I doubt it is in print. I'm guessing it is just used. Is being understood an okay alternative to having mind changed? I don't think you have to have the goal of having your mind changed. And I think being understood is a key part of all this, Brian, because you until both parties, okay, like say you're having an intellectual conversation or even a fight, a relational fight, until both parties understand both, at least to some significant degree, both what they think and feel personally, individually, and what the other person thinks and feels, you're not even talking. It's just like it's egoic fear defensiveness. And I had that I recently had that conversation with my son because I was trying to talk about, I have a local friend who's part of our local estuary who's been talking to me a lot about in different modes about ADHD, because she was saying I probably have ADHD, which is probably true, and undiagnosed, and potentially my son has it. We've kind of always wondered that. And anything to be blessed is to be cursed as well, or to be cursed is to be blessed as well. It's just like, what do you receive with meekness, the implanted word? Everything's a gift if you receive it as a gift. So you have ADHD, well, use it for God's glory, or for, well, whatever. And so part of my ADHD is what makes me just like thinking 50 things at once and mosaic vision and all that stuff. But it also makes me very impractical. Like I'm not good at very practical stuff. I have to have a Google Calendar, and I have to have a wife who keeps me outlined. It's just like, this is what you're doing today, and then remind me throughout the day, like, these are also the things that need to happen. And which is, I'm kind of childlike in that way, but like I'm That's part of it, though, is in a lot of ways, I'm pretty present, which is a good thing, can be a good thing. But then when you're very present, you're not practically thinking of the schedule, you know, or being very relationally present. So come on, let's get some people in it. Break the fourth wall, or just other people. Come in. Let's rock and roll. Let's talk. Let's play. See money. What are you doing? You could come in here and talk to me. I told him I was gonna maybe be streaming. Hey Sam, I want to talk to this guy. What's up, friend?
Not too much. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm feeling refreshed, man. The whole beach vacation was I'm sold on them. I feel like I do this regularly. Or I need to do something where I have nothing to do
Yeah,
and no
that sounds
distractions.
nice.
Because I'm too wound up, man.
And your kids are old enough where that's actually like a plausible situation.
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, depending. Sometimes you can work it out with Grandma and Grandpa, but sometimes that's a big ask.
Yeah.
Depending on how many you have. If you are being fruitful and multiplying and you've got quite a litter, sometimes it's one thing for Grandma and Grandpa to come in and watch them for a night or a few hours, but if you're just like, hey, come and watch them for 4 or 5 days, morning, evening, and night, and clothe them and feed them and adjudicate their arguments, you know?
Adjudicate.
Yeah.
What's a luminary? Luke?
Well, it's my namesake, man. Bringer of light. It's the stars by which people see. You know, it's the Paul's talked about that in the corner. You know, and like even celebrities are stars. You know, they're the luminaries. Whether or not they're good or valuable luminaries can be debatable. But I do like that was the thing that you're a good person to talk to with this about Christian. But like I read a book like this. Like I have not it's been a while since I've read a book and just been like this fired up where I'm just like my like gold sensor is going off where I'm just like this book's the shit. Like there's a lot in this. Like I feel like I'm going to level up reading this book. And that like fires me up and I'm like I want to make stuff like this. Like I want to talk and say things that like make people feel inspired and alive, which inspiration, right? Descent of the dove, spirit. Like that's the whole point. It gets me energized, you know?
Well, I would say that you are. There was what, 30, 40, 50 people listening to you talk? I mean, and part of it's relationship, part of it's luminary, part of it's friendship. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, hopefully.
Yeah.
That's I love that, man. And that's part of what TLC is. I mean, with all you guys, that's part of why I think people keep coming back. That's one of the recurrent things of TLC is I had nobody to have these conversations with.
Yeah.
And still it's kind of that. But like, I mean, how many people in my real life, my priest gave me this. I need to tell him because when he was retiring, I think he basically just gave me like all the books that he knew I would like. And so like I can talk to him about this kind of stuff, but it's also all the time and years of vocabulary and frequent interactions, you know, that we've had in the corner. They create something because like basically every time I see something in this book or take a screenshot, like I send them to Sam all the time, you know?
And I sometimes even read them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're part of one of the smaller circles and groups that gets most of my frenetic flurry of ideas.
I like your frenetic flurry of ideas. We had meetup last night and it was just good. You know, we had our regular monthly Chicago meetup group. We had like 11
Not estuary.
not estuary. at Chicago meetup estuary, kind of.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was great. And like every single person went to the bar afterwards, right? The library kicks us out. We meet from 7 to 9, and then the library kicks us out because they close. And then we go to the bar across the street. And there was like a new bartender, and he's like, "Well, whose birthday is it?"
So, let me see if I can.
And it's like, and we're like, "Oh, it's no one's birthday." But then one of the guys in our group was like, "Actually, it is my birthday." And we're like, "Happy birthday!" And he brought
Nice.
everyone around to drinks, and it was a good time. It was a good time. Like, what did we talk about? We talked a little bit about everything. We talk about politics a fair amount, probably more than Van Donk would like. And most of us have a relatively shared perspective on a lot of that stuff, but not completely, for sure. But we talked about things that were deeper than politics too, and it was great. I don't know, I love it. I'm like, you don't need super high expectations.
Yeah.
We're doing good, and we talked a little bit about the conference that we're planning, and that Jacob is very excited to attend, and things are going well.
I mean, but that kind of stuff is needed. Like any true community or relationship, you're going to have periods of lulls and downtime and quiet. Like I think that's a huge thing of, are you comfortable being like, that's a huge, I think, bar of relational depth when you're comfortable being quiet with people.
Okay, I am crossing the stream because I started a stream 10 minutes before you did.
Dang, sorry, man.
I will not forgive you. So
Okay.
I am streaming this stream on my stream.
Oh, the streams are crossing.
How do I need to add this? What are we doing?
So that's you streaming my stream, streaming your stream, streaming.
Oh my Lord.
That's so meta. It's an infinite loop of stream crossing.
And Trey and Andrew, who are waiting in an airport in Greece.
Wow.
Because they just got back from Mount Athos.
They went to Mount Athos together? That's cool.
They're on my stream, watching your stream, watching my stream, watching your stream.
Yeah, well, they should just click on Luke's link.
I feel like this is a first, isn't it?
Have you been to Mount Athos, Luke?
I think it is.
Luke, have you ever been to Mount Athos?
I have not. I perhaps will someday. I'm guessing there's a decent likelihood, but I don't really. The problem
is you wouldn't come back. You would just go and be a hermit, and we'd never see you again.
Okay, I am going to stop my stream because Luke is so much more important than I am. Hierarchy. He is the controller, so I'm going to stop my stream.
You're the king of the streams.
His stream because Luke is more important. So yeah, hierarchy. We have to.
I'm not very planned is the problem, and I have limited times to do this.
Who of us is? Who among you is well planned?
I'm trying to. So that's something. I mean, Seabax can answer this. Gabe, come in at any time, or Gabriel, whichever you prefer. But I've been thinking that I need to. I've been thinking of a major. This maybe doesn't seem that major, but I'll have a lifetime rearrangement of things. So normally this is the time when I'm able to do this sort of thing. So this is when I'll stream in the morning, and then I'll maybe go work out or whatever. But I'm thinking about what I should do. And then I'm just basically like brain dead and tired at the end of the day and wrecked. But I think what I might start doing, both because I want to engage with my kids and because I want to start reading more because I love this stuff, is I might not start working out until the evening and then get all the endorphins jacked up. And then I'll be more awake and attentive. And then I can read, hang out with the kids, or like do streams at night because I think those are a lot more accessible to most people.
I don't know. I feel like the mid-morning time is a good time.
People definitely show up more during the day than they do at night.
Oh,
yeah.
Really?
I mean, I feel like TLC self-selects for people who, through whatever job that they have or don't have, are relatively flexible around this particular time. You know, it's a little bit after homeroom, and you know, we're either working remotely or on the way to work or not working or something in between.
Yeah.
I wonder if Gen Z is more available at nighttime without kids.
Yeah, because those of us with kids, you know, once it's dinner and bedtime and that sort of thing, you know, that's our family hour.
I'll be honest with you. People who are online in the middle of the night usually have either insomnia or have lots of worries in their life, and like that's why they're up in the middle of the night, that type of thing. And I'm fine with that, but yeah. Okay, this is why I started streaming, and we didn't talk about it on my channel because we had a bunch of Eastern Orthodox Mount Athos pilgrims.
Oh, geez.
So I'm gonna take over your stream.
Do it.
So what I've noticed, especially over the past month, is the conversation seems to be losing its grounding in reality because the mainstream media has lost its capacity to report on what's going on in the real world. And the online commentariat that we've been having, like commenting on stuff. I mean, the perfect example, so we discussed this at Estuary last night. The perfect example for me has been what's going on in Syria. The mainstream media is not reporting on what's going on in Syria at all. And you have the online commentary like Sagar and Jati and Crystal Ball, not that anybody needs to know who those are, but perfect example. Like people whose job it is to read the news and then talk about it online, right? They've been completely misunderstanding what's going on because they have no capacity to actually get information. And I've been seeing this over and over in many different situations. And in a very real sense, I mean, that's what we do, is we read the normal news and we discuss things together. But the legacy media is like dead. It hasn't been reporting on stuff.
That was a big topic at our meetup last night, was, you know, prioritizing who to trust and who to listen to and who to pay attention to about important topics. And I do think that this is one of the things that TLC does is, you know, we're not just like a news and politics sort of club, but one of the features that we do is something like helping process and prioritize and synthesize this kind of weird information now that we live in a very sort of broken and scattered and sort of distrustful information landscape. Like, you know, I mean, I watched some YouTube channels. Is anyone talking about the fact that Rwanda is trying to take over Eastern Congo? You know, and that could lead to a war that kills millions of people?
Look, Luke,
you know, like no one's talking about that, right? But
okay, this is really short. The President of the United States truthed this out today.
Donald is coming to set you free, bringing the light for all to see. No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new life. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza, number one. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new life. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza, number one.
Was that Netanyahu and Trump on like floaties in a pool?
Wow.
This is the President of the United States. The President of the United States.
I don't even know what to make of that.
So how much of that is him trolling the trolls and just leaning into mocking them
100%.
for making fun of him?
100%.
So you think it's comedy?
It's 100% comedy. If you've never listened at length to a Trump speech, the man is a stand-up comedian. He is the first stand-up comedian president we've ever had.
Yeah.
I don't know. Bill Clinton had a little bit of that aspect to him, but he still would have never done anything like this.
So I don't know. I don't think Rick means that in the way that like my youth meant that.
Yeah, but like that's
Yeah.
part of the thing. It's like we're sorry. Like,
Wait a minute, did
I
he
don't
mean
know,
that
Rick.
like, oh, that was sick, or like, oh, that's
No,
sick?
I am pretty sure he didn't realize the double entendre there.
Yeah.
Like all the cool kids are like, it's like Michael Jackson with bad. Remember when he was saying I'm bad, and
Yeah.
like people were like, "What do you mean you're bad?" And he's like, "I'm bad," and like,
To the bone.
yeah,
But bad is good when good is bad. Yeah. I mean, I've still explained my plan for the Gazans, that they need to be taken to Forest City, Malaysia, this Chinese-built ghost town in southeast Malaysia that has like capacity for like 1.5 million or 2 million people, that's sitting completely empty. Just need to load. I did the math. You know, a cruise ship, if you pack it up, can fit about 10,000 people. And, you know, there are something like 20 or 30 operational cruise ships in the world. You could do it with like a couple trips, and you build some floating docks in Gaza, load everyone up onto some nice cruise ships, it takes about 2 weeks to sail to Malaysia.
yeah, just
drop them off, give them
2
some
million
free-
people who don't want to leave. Just like go ahead and pack them onto cruise ships.
I don't know. I mean, the cruise ships probably look kind of inviting. You know, would you rather be in Gaza or a cruise ship, or would you rather be in Gaza or a nice custom-built vacation city that the Chinese never occupied, because they do things like that?
Okay, I took a poll last night at the estuary. I want to take the same poll, and I want to take another poll. First poll: have you heard what's going on in Syria? Luke,
No.
Sam.
Well, I mean, I know some amount about what's going on in Syria, but not like everything. I know that they got taken over by a Turkish-backed militia, but
Okay, that's not what I'm talking about. Christian, have you heard anything about Syria?
Zero.
Gabriel, have you
I
heard
do want to
anything?
make a point. I do want to make a point to your point about the media, though. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yep.
I think that's interesting because most of like the right media, the resistance media, was like all commentary on the media, like you're saying, Jacob.
Mhm.
And so if the mainstream media doesn't then the commentary reaction media doesn't have anything to, it's like another development of the poly crisis, meaning crisis. And I do think that's interesting.
Gabriel, have you heard anything about Syria?
I've only heard that something is happening in Syria. I have not heard. the
Okay.
specific-
I'm getting off because it's all robot-y on here. But hi,
yeah.
Kezi. And I've got to try to order some food.
All right. See you, buddy.
Okay, see ya. Second question. Luke, did
Yeah.
Epstein kill himself?
did who?
I doubt it.
Epstein kill himself. Kezi, did Epstein kill himself?
No.
Sam, did Epstein kill himself?
A high probability on no.
Gabriel, did Epstein kill himself?
I've heard that he did not.
Are these connected?
So
Yeah.
what's going on?
Yeah. The
What's
question,
going on in
like,
Syria?
look, what's happening in Syria is Israel has declared southern Syria to be free of Syria.
Well, I knew that Israel sort of took over Mount Hermon and, a couple of the like Golan Heights-ish sort of places. But I mean, how much of Syria are we talking about?
Half of it.
One second. But Jacob,
Like, does that
He's
include
getting
Damascus?
triggered. Khazi's getting triggered.
Does this include Damascus or just
So
like
Benjamin Netanyahu said that he will no longer allow the Syrian army to go south of Damascus.
so all of like Mount Hermon and like sort of that deserty wasteland south and east of Damascus is off limits to the Syrian government?
Yes.
So, and that includes a lot of the religious minorities live there, like the Druze and folks like that,
Yes.
and maybe some Christians, but I think Christians are more in like the Northwest. And so, and he intends to back that up with force, I assume. I assume that's not just a boast.
Yeah.
Wow.
To be clear, though, Jacob.
Yeah. Okay, it's not half of Syria. South of Damascus is...
And it's not an expansion. The attitude is, don't bring in an army over here. And you have to look at this in the context of the other deals going behind the scenes, which also Israel has to protect Jordan from being taken over as well, or having Turkey come in as well. So Israel
obviously, yeah. The thing that is going on, like, it is so complex. Like, MBS, everything that's going on is so effing complex. That's why I was like, have you heard of it? Because we are not getting like actual...
I mean, I knew that Israel had basically seized Mount Hermon, and like that's really important because Hezbollah would like hide some of their rocket stuff behind Mount Hermon, such that it made it harder for Iron Dome to detect and intercept it ahead of time. But if you control Mount Hermon, then you've got the highlands all the way into all of Lebanon and Syria, and you can place all of your anti-missile stuff and detection radar business up there, and you can basically see all of, you know, everything, and Israel would be much safer. But that, I mean, that's crazy. Like the example, I mean, I feel like what's happening is that the underlying rules of the game have changed, and it's unclear what that means for the strategy of the game, and it's even less clear what that means for the scoreboard of the game. Right. And I feel like people are trying to figure out what the rules are in this new Trump world, and then how that fits into what you should strategize about and who's going to win and lose is still entirely in flux.
I mean, right? The maps are changing before our eyes, right? The maps our kids are going to learn are going to be different than the ones we went to school in. And during this very volatile time, you can't, personally, I don't know, and put aside who's in charge, you can't expect Israel to be like, well, we're just going to hope, especially when you hear, you know, insanity being promoted in some of these countries. So while this could be concerning for some as far as greater Israel, I would say that Israel is offering right now, you know, is sort of setting the stage and saying to Syria, as long as you know, if your intentions are true, right, about, you know, turning a leaf, taking on a more moderate approach, then everything we could rock and roll. Has yet to be seen. And I think because of all the moving parts Jacob was talking about right now, Israel is really sort of locking down a whole landmass and saying for things to be able to be settled and move on to a next stage, there has to be some sort of stability. So if this area is left open, it just it brings in Syria, Jordan, and Turkey into a whole nother mix, which Israel is just not interested in doing right now, to my estimation. But Jacob, illuminate us.
Well, first of all, Chad had a baby. That's more important than most of this stuff.
Mazal tov.
Yay, Chad.
Second, and I don't know if he's sharing pictures all around, but she's beautiful. As far as what's going on, Israel is, as it has always been, a vassal state of the United States, and it's doing precisely what Trump, Putin, and MBS have decided to do.
Israel's a little bit of a finicky vassal, though. Israel will certainly go its own way and test the boundaries of American patience. And not always listen to every instruction given or follow it to the T.
That's
Correct.
because the United States doesn't have a strong will. We're a democracy, but when it comes down to it, now that Trump, Putin, and MBS are making the decisions, and they're making actual decisions, and Bibi has to do precisely as he's told.
I'm not gonna lie. This is where, like, I love Chezi to death. Chezi knows you're like you're my Jew of choice in the corner. You and Joseph. Like, Jacob and I don't get along as well. But Jacob, when he's like against American militarism and the connections with Israel, this is where I like this Jacob. I'm good with it.
It turns out that I'm looking at an ethnic map of Syria. That part of Syria is heavily Druze.
Yeah.
And Druze was the minority of the Assad family. And
No.
presumably...
No, that's the Alawites.
Oh, Alawites. Sorry, you're right.
Yeah.
Alawites and Druze.
Druze are the
similar but different.
Gentiles.
Yeah.
Are the Gentiles who live in Israel and gladly serve in the army.
We have a very strong and special connection with our Druze cousins, who their line goes back to Jethro, Nebi Shuaib, as they call him.
And isn't their religion basically like sort of like a Gnostic Islam? Yeah.
Isn't this what Food Truck Emily's husband is?
Yes, I think he is Druze. I think so.
Then why is she so anti-Semitic?
Oh, don't.
Jacob. She's just.
Yes, she is. Have you
Jacob,
seen her Twitter?
Back to Druze in Syria.
Right. The Druze, unfortunately, Israel does not, and there's many things Israel should rectify, but for Druze who spilled much blood in many wars, and specifically in this war, it's very, very problematic that Israel doesn't offer them even more protection. Also with regards to rights, but that is a very special relationship. And with regards to the religion, I would say only the clerics really know what's going on. And they're very, very, keep it very close to the chest. But a lot of their, I wouldn't say saints, but they're very into like Aristotle, Plato. Like I'm saying, all the philosophers are like a very big deal in the Druze.
They're related to Ismaili Islam too. Right, the Druze who call themselves whatever it is, literally the monotheists or the Unitarians. They call.
Why don't all the Unitarians just get together and kill the Trinitarians?
We're not about that. But I mean, although I do think that we could outnumber you if we really.
Guys, this is we're all fellows. Okay, one of you is loved and seen and heard.
I have to say, as much as I love Seabacks and I love Grimm, I was a tiny bit offended that Chezi didn't get invited to ARC.
What? Jacob.
Do you have to get invited to go to ARC, or can you just buy a ticket?
I think the first time you did, right?
Apparently next year they're going to allow anybody to buy a ticket.
But last time you still had to get invited, and they had 4,000 people.
Sure, yeah.
Where was my invitation? Yeah.
Where's my invitation so I can not
agree. Where
go?
are all of our invitations? All of us deserved to be invited to ARC.
I'll be honest. If I had gotten an invitation, I'm not sure I would have gone. I probably would have gone. But if it was like, here's an invitation, either Chezi can go or Jacob can go, I would definitely have sent Chezi.
It was actually discussed on this other channel I was watching in Israel, where they were talking about ARC. And the person, it's actually he's a technologist, but he also talks about some religious and spiritual elements. And he was talking about ARC and how it's like, this is the move of the West, and anyone should have been there and networking. But he was, and this is something we've talked about often, which is if the representatives of Judaism are Eric Weinstein, Dennis Prager, and Ben Shapiro, it's not good.
All three of them are Zionists. God have mercy on them.
Oh man.
So I think like if Israel believes or thinks it has something to say to the world, it should figure out how to get to those stages, A, and B, think what it is it wants to say. But again, I don't think Ben Shapiro is it's quite weird. There's like I think like the second week of the war, the minister of Hasbara, how do you say Hasbara, Jacob?
Propaganda.
Sure. Okay. the minister of propaganda quit. We haven't had one since, right? So the whole year that wasn't happening. And the three most successful people in defending Israel are two Arabs and Douglas Murray. And it's just very strange that
and that's how it should be.
There's no Jewish Israeli voice that has something to say.
Some of us have read Isaiah 53. Many of us misidentify.
Why aren't you Christians then with Jesus?
Right. It's obviously about Jesus being crucified. Haven't you read Isaiah 53?
I never thought about it.
And Isaiah 53 is quite clearly about the one who goes like a lamb to the slaughter and does not open his mouth.
Like Jesus.
Except Jesus did plenty of opening his mouth.
No, he was during his trial scenes, he's quiet.
You know, Jesus, equal with God, of one essence.
Oh.
You know what? Shadow disagrees.
Shadow disagrees.
2,000 years ago, we reached an amazing point where basically, Christians, if you look at the name Christians in Christos or Messiah or Messians. So basically, Christians are messianists and Muslims are God-fearers. And, 2,000 years ago, we already got to a point where a massive swath of the world already has accepted the master of the universe. So that is obviously fantastic. Then I would argue our disappearance from the map left a lot of confusion out there. And now when, again, there's something to say, I think people are expecting to hear as great a message as 2,000 years ago.
Okay, I want to open up space. Gabe, I don't know if you have things to say or if the subject changed and you just look like you've been politics war smacked over there. Also, Deacon Parker and Alan need to spot to chime in.
Yeah, no, I jumped on to talk about working out during the day and being scatterbrained and thinking about a lot of things all at once and not being very efficient. I related to that, but no, I mean, I'm being educated here. I know a little bit, but not a lot about it. So mostly just keeping my mouth shut. So
yeah,
but I guess the Trinitarians in this stream could probably take the Unitarians. So bring it
in a fight. Mark Parker, listen, he's said this before. He's got a little age on him, but I bet Mark Parker could throw a heck of a right cross.
Not anymore. No, I don't have much to say. Although I do. Hello, Jacob. Nice to see you. The fact that a former Al Qaeda leader is now president of Syria, is that part of Israel's decision to expand a demilitarized zone north of Israel? Any thoughts on that?
I think it's because Syria is weak and Israel is not, and Hezbollah is weak. So, there's food on the table to be grabbed, and they're not holding back. And Trump's not going to tell them no.
I don't think he's a puppet. Like if you're asking if Israel installed him over there, whether or not he has changed his colors, I think that's sort of what we're all waiting for. And right now, once Israel basically got rid of the major weapons that they had over there in Syria, and now the attitude is do your thing, but any moment there's weapons being moved towards our area, it's bombs away, so to speak. So I really think it has yet to be seen. I truly, truly hope that in this vacuum right now, people will take a step back and for a moment think because like we said, the maps are changing. These are opportunities right now. People can change. The world is sort of looking at this ex-Al-Qaeda person and saying, if you rise to the occasion, you could change from Mr. Al-Qaeda into potentially even a hero. It really depends how you take this opportunity. So I think that's true.
Odds are he's just going to be a vassal of Turkey. And that's not a terrible situation for Israel because Turkey doesn't want weapons being shipped to Hezbollah either. The real loser in this is Putin. That's another thing that people don't talk about.
No.
Is that, Russia is losing their entire naval outposts in the Eastern Mediterranean.
No, see, that's the thing. Putin and Marco Rubio and Mohammed bin Salman seem to have pretty much divided the globe between the three of them.
Not the globe, the Middle East.
No, the globe.
And Africa is also up in play too.
There seems to be a very serious realignment going on right now, and this is part of what makes me think. Look, I've been listening to what's been going on in the mainstream media. Ezra Klein yesterday did a podcast where he had an unironic Trump voter speak, and he didn't push back. Like the realignment that's going on in the real world, things are changing really, really quickly. I have been comparing what's going on to what happened in Russia during the time of Gorbachev. There is real change going on in the world, and I keep on going back to what Brett Weinstein called it on Joe Rogan. The comet has hit, and the dinosaurs haven't noticed. Things are really changing very quickly.
There's only one navy in the world capable of projecting power globally, and that's the United States, and Trump's in the process of destroying it. So when that single hegemon is off the table, when that single hegemon is off the table, then yes, you're going to have a variety of centers of power that are regional, and we'll see what happens.
So, first off, I want to have this open to be a space where people can talk about things, because that's back to the Rod quote, where like the level of conversation and friendship is inversely proportional to the topics that are off the table. So I'm open to, because geopolitics is not my favorite thing to talk about, but I'm open to talking about it because I think that it can be pretty divisive. And I think what you've seen here depends a lot upon where you're standing and the kind of person you are. So it makes it complicated. But I don't know. And like Mark was saying, it's fine to talk about these things, but Mark said something about but helping someone down the street is more important. Well, sure. But we're talking on the internet. What do you want us to talk about? Helping our neighbor down the street? We could talk about that too.
I was really interested in Descent of the Dove. I was kind of, this took a strange turn. I was really, because he talked me into buying the book. So I bought the book.
Which book?
Descent of the Dove, the book you.
Oh, yeah, the book I was talking about. Sorry, I just missed what you said right away. But yeah, it is a very excellent book. There's things I really want. I need to read this book and take notes and make some structure, because the stuff that he's talking about in here, I think, is really, really important. And it's related, one of the things that he says, it's in here, which is kind of related to this topic. Let me find it. Sorry. But it's essentially talking about so one of the things that he says the Holy Ghost is doing and the church is doing, I mean, he's obviously a Christian, is that this operation of the Holy Spirit coming, the operation had to be continued under conditions. And the conditions at the moment were three: Jewish religion, Roman order, and Greek intellect. And then so he goes through, and then a lot of what the first chapter was and the second have been about how the occurrences of history was Christianity reconciling God to those three aspects of what does Athens have to do with Israel. And so their Christianity is kind of reconciling itself to all these things, and through somewhat these seeming, because I think the central thesis of the book is that reconciliation is the goal. But in order for there to be reconciliation, there has to be separation, fall, disorder, chaos, disagreement, disruption. And so God is using trampling down death by death. He's using death to defeat death. And I think what Charles Williams is saying is the Holy Spirit is using through the church conflict, disagreement, even I was thinking about Sam reading a lot of this book, because the way that he's bringing in these disagreements in the early church is like toward this purpose, but like it's so hard to see it because arguably, and this is something Jordan Daniel Wood has said, is that we think of all, and Charles Williams talks about how everybody thought it was so soon. Everything was going to happen so soon. That's what a lot of critics of the New Testament will say. And that's true, but God is working through time to do all these things. What if like the big picture is, what if it's 20,000 years? What if it's 80,000 years? You know, who knows? What if it's 500,000 years? And like what the church is doing through all these different things, like we just have such a myopic view of it, and through all these things. The one thing I will say about geopolitics, and Woody Harrelson said this, I started listening a little bit to him on Rogan, is, and this is true with like the series of years and events that shall not be named, so I'm not demonetized or whatever, but like see who's profiteering. I'm a big fan of follow the money when it comes to war, when it comes to pharmaceuticals, when it comes to anything. Who's making the money? And
why isn't it me?
yeah, it's just like who's making the bombs, who's selling the bombs, who's giving people the bombs, and why. And I think usually, like,
well, keep asking though, keep going with that, because you chase it all the way down the rabbit hole. I include Doge, include all of these manipulations. How we're going to have a whole new generation of politicians that are coming in that are going to get rich and serving in government.
How do you think
and Richard,
Doge and Elon are who's profiteering from that?
The manipulation. There's no checks and balances. There's no oversight over this strange little department right now.
There is. I mean, they can't do anything outside of executive power. And the legislature at any point could do things,
but it's
stop
not
them.
doing
and
anything
judges.
right now.
Well, that's because the legislature is Republican. I mean, I feel like this Doge stuff was a huge part of Trump's campaign, and part of the reason, like, this is what people voted for, and so they're following through on a campaign promise that people voted for in the largest general election in U.S. history. So of course it's Democratic. I feel like. They're not overstepping.
You've got the richest man in the world in charge of this project, who has not recused himself from the markets as in the normal operation of government going back to like the 1930s, 40s, 50s. You had basically you at least made an attempt or a gesture towards distancing yourself. You had insights or inside knowledge of government policy that would have impacts on the markets. And
I get your point that Elon could tip the things in his scales, or tip the scales in his favor. And I honestly am a little bit worried about the absolute power corrupting Elon. And I do sincerely think that there will probably be some big mistake that he eventually makes because he has been too unchecked. But let me read something from the second richest man in the world to help add some perspective. So this is something Jeff Bezos tweeted out earlier. He might be the third or fourth richest. I can't keep track. But anyway, he's up there. This is exactly what Jacob is talking about. So Jeff Bezos tweeted this out, at 8:30 today. Central Time. I shared this note with the Washington Post team this morning. And remember, Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post. I'm writing to let you know about a change coming to our opinion pages. We are going to be writing every day in support and defense of two pillars, personal liberties and free markets. We'll cover other topics too, of course, but viewpoints opposing those pillars will be left to be published by others. I am of America and for America and proud to be so. Our country did not get here by being typical, and a big part of America's success has been freedom in economic realms and everywhere else. So that change in the media landscape, this is a big deal.
Well, and part of one of the things I was going to bring up, I couldn't find it, is Peugeot, to your point, Mark, and I think this is valid. Like, one of the things, he said that with all the stuff that Doge is doing, and he's eliminating all this stuff for, theoretically, assuming good faith, smaller government, just getting rid of all this corruption. But he said then it's kind of like what Jefferson said of like, was it Jefferson, or but like essentially any power that you give the government or precedent that you establish, like that can then be used by the people who you disagree with in the future. So like all these things that he's getting rid of could create some kind of vacuum where you like cast out all the evil spirits, even viewed positively, of the house. But then all of a sudden 7 more come back and it's even worse than before. Like if you just clean the house of all this waste, something may come in and rush in later and take its place, even assumed positively, take everything positively. And I think that's something worth considering, you know? I also think it's really worth considering that like Trump getting shot in the head and then Elon being his false prophet looks a lot like Revelation. I mean, I think you could map that pretty directly.
All right, I gotta go eat lunch. Nice talking to
Okay.
you. Thanks for hosting,
Yeah.
Luke.
See you later, buddy.
Well, I think to approach it somewhat narratively, in terms of what I hope will happen, is you talk about the house being cleared out and then being reoccupied. What I'm hoping will happen is a lot of those rooms, a lot of those extensions that have been built onto the house of government, if you will be torn down and destroyed, and there won't be a space to occupy. Granted, they may like to come back and build a lot of those things and fill them up again, but you're dealing with a back and forth of a pendulum of building things up and tearing things down, and building things up and tearing things down, and always looking for the ideal state of rhythm between those two things. And I think there's been a lot of building going on. You look at $30+ trillion, like what has that been building? It's been building something, even if it's just this sort of ethereal definition of corruption. There are institutions that have been built up around these things, and it's been a long period of building. And I think a time of tearing down is certainly worthwhile. But when you light something on fire to clear out the garbage, like just don't. I like to say, don't burn it so hot that you crack the old stone foundations. Like remember what worked relatively well, and try to maintain those things. It goes back to the idea of honoring your father and mother. Try to maintain those things and expand upon them and grow them in a healthy way. But I think it's hard to ignore the fact that you're dealing with a situation where there's a lot of excess architecture around this structure built on the enormous wealth that's been flowing through the system, largely unaccountable to anyone, really. And that has to be taken into consideration. And it's always a balance, and there's always arguments both ways, and there's generally good arguments in both directions. But it's only because the system is, I think, ideal. The ideal system is designed to work in both of those directions, because it's a balancing. It goes back to the left hemisphere, right hemisphere, master, emissary. It's always a flowing back and forth. And so I look at this, the pendulum is swinging back for sure. And it's like, are we going to demand retribution and just accelerate that swing? And then we end up in the opposite tyranny of a hardcore conservative dogma, priest class, whatever. You kind of end up on either side, left or right, extreme. Or are we going to pay attention to where the point of balance is, and are we going to do our best to decelerate this thing in a way that allows us to land on a manageable rhythm of pendulum swing, rather than this accelerating
hard swings
cycle of justice. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about that.
Yeah, that seems like a healthier pattern of just regular political give and take versus the kind of, feels like we've been in for just so long in American politics. At least the sky is falling, you know, like something happens and it's just like, it's the end of the world.
But that's a tool of building as well. That's a tool of building. Is this is all going to go wrong, you need to let me build this thing, or it's all going to fail and everything's going to fall apart.
The Hoover Institute has a podcast or show that they do on YouTube. I think it's called Goodfellas or something like that. And Stephen Kotkin was on it with Neil Ferguson and another famous economist. And this is a conservative institute a think tank out of Stanford. Stephen Kotkin is the famous biographer of Stalin, and he studied revolution all his life. And he made the point that tearing down, and he's a conservative himself, mind you, or at least moderate. And he said tearing down is always very tempting. It's easy. But when we do tear things down, we end up building back with the rubble, with pieces and parts of what's left over of what's been torn down. And it's always, historically, in his opinion, a lesser quality. What's been built back. Revolutions don't generally build back better. It was an interesting observation, and at least from his perspective of communist revolutions, it's true. Fascist revolutions, it's true. The only exception might be the American Revolution, maybe. But
I think you kind of have to separate between the big old stone blocks versus the new growth pine structures that have just been thrown up ad hoc. Because I agree, if you're tearing down things that lasted a long time, the metaphor of the big stones, if you're breaking those apart and building from that rubble, it will be lesser. And I don't disagree with the metaphor in those terms, but the structures I was talking about that are being torn down, it's like a lean-to city on the old pyramids. Like I think there's pictures back before like that area got cleaned up for tourists. You would see these just little shanty towns around in that area, and then the robbing of the pyramid, like tearing off all the marble to build all the cities. So I'm not disagreeing with you, but I'm just playing with.
Like the global reserve currency, America has. We have the single global reserve. We have it. We are it. And it gives us a lot of economic flexibility. It's a big source of our prosperity and resilience since World War II. We're well on the way with this administration of destroying it, and the profligacy of the prior administration didn't help. So if that goes, I mean, that to me is that's what I meant by American hegemony is being deconstructed. And without that global reserve currency, we probably won't be able to finance the Navy that will give us the ability to project power globally, which will leave large parts of the world free to be either free to be self-governing or free to be tyrannized by pirates or bullies or local warlords.
Well, here's one thing. I'm going to wrap this up. I want to see what Alan has to say, but I'm going to tie it back into The Man Who Was Thursday, which is mainly about, it's a detective thriller novel set around in old England around like the early part of the 20th century. And it's all these detectives in search of the anarchists, the dynamiters who want to blow everything up. And some of the things that he says in there, which are really good, are like essentially only the rich, to your point, Mark, are anarchists because they're the only ones who can afford it. Like everybody else is reliant on the structures, no matter how fallen they are, to protect them from the impending chaos, from the barbarian tribes outside or whatever. So that's something to think about. And I have lots of thoughts about that because that was all over the book. And as someone who identifies as a Christian anarchist, that's kind of in your face.
There's a funny scene, Luke, and this getting. Yeah. I've seen these stupid clips from the. It's a horrible show, but it's little clip. The clips are funny. That 70s show or something,
Mm-hmm.
where one of the young guys falls in love with a 70s anarchist, this anarchist girl, and it's very funny. I got to send it to you. I was tempted.
Yeah, yeah.
That being a
So
Christian anarchist.
yeah, I don't know about the structures of the world. I've definitely never been a fan of American nation building and the military-industrial complex and all that purported American benevolence that was really just us playing chess with the world and saying we're spreading democracy and helping everyone. Like, I don't buy it at all. But the main thing, to circle back to like my monologue, and is that I think what I like about the corner and what I want us to continue to get better at, although with like Jacob and Mark, Jacob just left right away. You can't, and this is something that Rogan said with Woody Harrelson, and he brought it up as like one of the criticisms that Rogan gets all the time about like platforming and only having certain people, and like he was getting it all the time, like when he had Dr. Robert Malone on, and people are mad at him, and you shouldn't be platforming this person, and Rogan's like, by the way, everything he said was true. Like absolutely everything has been validated as true now. And he's like, and Rogan's like, I'll talk to anybody. It doesn't matter. Like I'll talk to people from every side. But like the platforming, I think that's something we have to do. If you are going to genuinely and accurately engage in ideas, whether it's about politics or theology or any topic, and this is and true, this is just for intellectuals. If you don't want to do it, just go love your neighbor and love your family. That's fine. Love the outsiders too and the aliens. If you just want to do that, it's fine. But if you want to engage with ideas and you're not engaging earnestly with the person in both the way of like understanding the feelings and the opinions of yourself and the other party, you're not engaging with ideas. You're doing some kind of weird fear-based non-zero-sum thing while calling yourself the good party. And that is just, I don't really have a lot of tolerance for that or time for that. It's not something I want to do because I feel like it's just a total waste of time. So
I'd still like to sit down and pay for I still owe Jacob a steak dinner. He won a bet and he won't talk to me. So
it'll happen. It'll happen some point.
At some point, maybe. I greeted him. I said, "Nice to see you, Jacob." Do I need to bring flowers next time?
Maybe. I don't know what Jacob learn. Jacob, if you're still in the comments, I'll ask him. I'll text him what his love languages are. So maybe some people don't like gifts.
Hearts to all.
Yeah. Alan and Gabe, closing thoughts.
I think a stream on anarchism would be fun. Maybe get Nate in here.
Nate would definitely come in.
Just to throw it out there, it does seem like a rebellion against anti-utopianism born of comfort is what it feels like.
Well, and I think that's the
that was crazy what you were just saying about hey Hezzy, sorry, never mind, sorry, just don't worry. It was kind of salacious, but just don't think about it, because I don't want to like go back there because it's so gross, and but sorry, continue, Luke, whatever you're saying that wasn't about Hezzy.
So no, I don't. I already said my piece. I mean, I don't have final words. I do. I mean, I'm going to continue talking about, everybody has our pet topics, like Paul said, universalism, anarchism. These are all things that I like to talk about, but I agree with you. I don't pretend to believe. It's kind of like I believe in the decriminalization of drugs, but I don't think that means that we should just do it tomorrow like that. I don't think that's wise. And I do think the way that I understand the kingdom of God is that no one will need anyone to teach you, but God will teach you from the inward man. That's anarchism. You don't need anybody else to tell you what to do. God tells you through the inward man. And that's my vision of anarchism. But like and like Phlebas has said, that's kind of he's like, okay, sure, like when everything's perfect. But I'm like, but that's what we're shooting for. Like, that's what we're trying to do. That's what we're trying to enact and be to the world right now, Okay, that's my final word. I'll shut up. Hezzy, you're muted, buddy.
Hey, I'm sorry that I had to run off. My wife had to fly out to the States. I am running this show on my own with the kids, which makes you wonder and reminds you how amazing our wives are because they're really rock stars.
Yeah.
And secondly, yes, Mark, you will eventually have your meal with Jacob, whether it's a steak or whether when we're all together at the temple. But regardless, it will happen. And just with regards to Luke's closing thoughts of, you're going to keep on doing what you're doing. A, Godspeed. B, thank you. And C, this is the conversation of the future. So that's all I'm interested in is, sure, there's ideas over there. You can talk politics, but the idea is to engage the other, see the image, and work on walking together as long as we can, as best we can. Obviously, we could focus on the differences, but I feel reality will have us focus on those differences eventually. And in the meantime, we should continue to replenish our toolkit with thoughts of inclusion and working together. Definitely as God seekers.
I think that's why
All
Luke's
for
channel
God.
is. Sorry.
No,
I think that's why
It's fine.
Luke's channel is the friendliest channel in TLC. Going back to what you said about, to the extent that topics are off the table, it's a limitation on friendship. And I think that's one thing I like about this live stream is you can come here and talk about just about anything, and it's generally quite civil and friendly.
It tries to be. I mean, that Rod quote is succinctly gets at it so much. It's just like, really try to put my money where my mouth is and be open to the truth outside the truth I currently apprehend. And I really try to be open to people that it's very hard for me to be open to, because I try to be existentially faithful to the idea that, like, I could be wrong. If you're constantly arrogant in your intellectual conversations with people, you're not really open to being wrong. You don't really have humility, not existentially.
Well, in terms of definitions, how many times has it just been a misunderstanding between someone? That you go right back to anarchy just a moment ago. Your definition of anarchy is different from what a lot of people use, and they may just write you up one way or another as a result. But then it's like, this is how I'm using the word, and they may have an issue with how you decided to define it. But you'll find that in the end you agree, and I find that happens constantly for me.
I think that's what it always is. I think in the end, there's a quote, I don't know who said it, but it's like, to know all is to forgive all. Like, that's my theology. I think it's all ignorance. I think when people know as they ought to know, when they know as they are known, there's no thing to forgive, because it was all ignorance. And like, that's what forgiveness is. I mean, to me, that's ultimate reconciliation. Sorry, Kezi, I know you're trying to say something.
I just don't think it's ignorance. You and I have spoken about this in the past. I just think as long as it's for heaven's sake, then it's not that I don't think you're wrong in a certain level. It's I don't think that I'm open to the idea that is part of the elephant that I just can't see. And I think, like, that doesn't mean that in a certain context, I could come and say my idea holds more truth or more validity to the specific context it's in. But that's not to negate. I mean, I don't want to sound too like wishy-washy when I say your truth, right? People use that term a little, but there is a sense which is, it's your truth as long as you're tethered back to the source. And if you're doing it, if the conversation is happening, and we talk about this often, in good faith and all the good stuff, then it's a conversation for heaven's sake. Yeah. And then those disagreements. What's up, Kwanzaa? Yeah. Debo. You want to say hi while you're picking your nose? All right, guys. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. See you, man. Oh, man.
This is the worst when people people just leave so they can hang out with their children, you know? I'm just like, what is wrong with you? We're having deep discussions on the nature of reality and God and politics, and you're just gonna speak to your child?
How does he
No.
even know what he's going to say to the kid if he hasn't finished this conversation to know what he should say?
Oh, it's really sickening. But, you know, some people don't have the stomach for truth, you know? You know?
Oh, and I wanted to ask Hezi before his child rudely interrupted. Was kidding? Was the there he is? Was as
I told my kid to know his place. Please. Okay.
Daddy said, "Shut up, go to bed."
that never worked for me.
What do you want to ask?
The well, it's this. There's the old Yiddish saying, "A half truth is a full lie," and the question it's when you start thinking that through, it's very hard to speak whole truths, and it's very even harder probably to hear whole truths. We're constantly nuancing, and I think we're so habitual in our nuancing of a massaging of the facts to keep our heart rates down and make ourselves feel okay, that we respond allergically, if not violently, to whole truths that are stated, at least spoken with sincerity, even if they're not factually whole truths, but they're intended as whole truths, non-massaged. And we did. It's just say something controversial and just watch the chat light up. You know, see the room and you're in any around a table or a family meal or whatever, and somebody says their whole truth, it can blow things up. But I wonder how we, with what you were talking about, how we work through that. How do we stop lying? How's that? Is that a simple way of putting it?
I like the whole truth, the idea of whole truth, but separating it from complete truth, because we each have a whole truth, and we can trim the fat on the things that we say, but none of us have the complete truth. So yeah, I think a distinction is worthwhile.
There's a famous story, a debate between Hillel the Great and his counterpart Shammai, and it's called Kala Na'ah V'Chasuda, which is like we're talking about a beautiful bride, and the idea.
Has anybody checked if Hezi actually speaking another language, or he's just making this up? I'm not trying to be rude here.
Everyone knows the famous saying of bleep blap bloop bloop.
This is the weirdest form of Spanish I've ever heard. I haven't heard any words I understand. Can we just get a fact check real quick?
So this bride, Hillel comes and asks, okay, you're going to the wedding, you crashed the wedding, and you see the bride, but she's ugly, right? Can you still say this blessing that she's beautiful? And Hillel says, yes, you still say that she's beautiful. And Shammai is like, what are you talking about? The truth, right? Jordan Peterson, right? I can't be going around telling them that she's beautiful. I just got to look at her and say, you're ugly, and look at her husband and be like, sorry, buddy. And we tend to the law, the halakha goes according to Hillel. And obviously people spoke a lot about white lies, but there's a sense where you have to understand how the truth needs to be held and seen by other people in the right context. And what you were talking about, Mark, about sort of the intentionality and where they're coming from when they're speaking these truths, right? So there's sometimes someone gives a half truth, not because he's trying to give you a half truth, because he's ignorant or doesn't know. And sometimes, I'll give a live example. It's not a truth, but Jacob and I were talking about something had to do with Israel. And there was a term in Hebrew, allegedly, Alan, that may God avenge their blood, right? So I just said it in Hebrew. I didn't say it in English. And then Jacob said it in English. And then I said, avenge is a loaded term, right? And then Jacob was like, no, you can't, don't say it's a loaded term. Like, speak truth to power. You explain why their blood needs to be avenged. Now, is that am I not speaking the truth when I'm really expanding on that whole idea, or I'm aware of the fact that that could trigger some people, and that doesn't make it not true. It just means I have to understand how to bring the truth to them, and I don't have to necessarily use triggering terminology. That doesn't mean I'm hiding from the fact of the truth. It just means I'm trying to package it, shape it, and not in a Machiavellian point of view, but rather because I want the idea to make sense, because I want them to see me and hear me, I need to put myself in their position, understand what they could actually hear from me. And that requires one to be humble. It requires one to try to see the other in themselves. So I think that makes sense, I hope, with regards to these half-truths.
So if your wife is ugly, reach for a deeper truth. For true beauty.
What does it mean to be
Look
ugly,
at yourself. How old do you look in the mirror? You know, then it might put her in perspective.
I'll see you guys later. I'm going to be streaming if anyone wants to join on Maimonides at 9:00, and then maybe we'll schmooze later.
How long is it?
Talk to you later.
9 o'clock your time? When is that?
As in another 35 minutes. And C-Money, I'm sorry we missed you. But I hope you and the family are doing well. Take care.
See you, buddy. Thanks for popping in. Okay, and I'm going to also go because I just got to go. But you guys can keep talking. I don't want to shut down the conversation and then just leave when you want to leave. Sorry. Hey, C-Money. I know. It's too long. I've been going too long already. I feel the itch of get to work or you're going to hell. So, Protestant work ethic.
Do your thing, man. Go do your thing.
All right. See you guys.
Bye, Luke.
Are we still in this? All right. Yeah, I wanted to get on with Mark. I thought you were bringing up a lot of good points about how, I don't know, we almost self-deceive ourselves by the story we tell ourselves. Like we kind of live in the world and then we try to make sense of it. And then by trying to make sense of it, we put it in our own words. And then by putting it on our own words, we kind of bias it. And then we kind of bias it to put it in our own words to kind of make ourselves look a little bit better. And then we try to live in these stories so much that we don't realize how often we're like slightly falsifying it or using creative framings to make ourselves look good or to put it into perspective. And so I think there's definitely a cultural habit of slightly deceiving ourselves and others by the ways that we categorize our experiences and our thoughts and our interactions and the way that we talk to each other. I think Peterson talks about that a lot, where he talks about how, he was saying things and then this little voice inside of him would be like, hey, you don't actually believe that. You don't actually mean that. And he just realized how often like kind of mimetic complexes were coming out of his mouth that weren't necessarily true. And like I don't know. I thought that was interesting and I wanted to jump on and see what you guys thought about that.
Well, you also need to realize, like, yeah, you can do that on purpose, but you also need other people to figure these sorts of things out because these concepts are not perfectly solid. Like if you know the sport of CrossFit, they call the champion of that sport the fittest person on earth, but it's like one of the guys who's like the best person of all time at that sport was like a D3 baseball player who quit the team. And it's like, is he a great athlete or is he a mediocre athlete? Well, before CrossFit was invented, he was kind of like a D3 level athlete, nothing special. And then this whole sport had to be invented for him to then become like the greatest of all time. And it's like, so what is it? Is he the greatest? Is he like a great athlete or not? And it's like that domain wasn't available yet, So if you change, when we say like, I don't know, I don't think I did a great job of explaining this, but basically like these concepts themselves you need to be careful of like who's worthless and who's not worthless. It's like, oh, you're on a cruise ship full of billionaires and then you're the person who swabs the deck and you're the least valuable person. And then the ship crashes and you're on a deserted island and you're the only person who knows how to make a fire. Suddenly you're the most valuable person, And And that's all dependent on, are you willing to play the game together? Are you willing to work together and find a way where you can all work together? Because you could, you literally don't know, are you the most valuable or the least valuable? It's all context dependent, and you're not fully aware of all those contexts.
Well, I think part of that is it's important to have that narrative. It's important to have that identity, but it's important too to hold that with an open hand and for it to be valuable, because in terms of what you said of CrossFit, it's like you can start to optimize and find the space where your gifts are maximized. And if that space doesn't exist, then you can talk about creating something like that. And to the extent that it adds value to the community, then that thing will flourish and grow. But again, you have to have a certain sense of yourself. And I think a narrative is important for that. But again, to what C Money was saying, I agree that you can take it too far. If it becomes less sensitive to the people around you, the world around you, then it turns into a more hard, dogmatic thing that doesn't evolve as quickly or adapt as well to changes, and is just not sensitive, not particularly good at relationship in the first place.
Well, it's
Yeah.
At what point?
I feel like our culture. Go ahead, Mark.
No, go ahead. I was just going to come
Mark.
around and tuck on what you're.
I feel like our culture kind of presupposes this. Our culture kind of presupposes this abstracted language, and then when we have this abstracted language and we're self-referential, it becomes a sort of solipsistic story that we're telling ourselves, and then that would go against having a communal identity where your identity is in constant relation based on the negotiations of your relationship. And so we tend to isolate and oscillate and have a self-referential story about how we tell ourselves versus constantly relating and changing and interacting. And so I think there's something about this modern dynamic that makes this solipsistic worldview like just stickier and more prevalent. So yeah, I just wanted to compliment that.
No, I think that's what depression is. It's there's no new information getting in. Like if you've ever been severely depressed, you understand that you can't even. It's like being in a sphere of darkness, and all the information you have is what you have with you inside that sphere. And so nothing new comes in, and if anything does, it just dissolves at the surface. And you really have to break out of that to start to adapt and grow again. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying. And given the prevalence of antidepressants these days, that's definitely the tendency, the trend of this age.
We don't have a healthy relationship with the other in our mind, or we don't have faith that we are able to confront a stranger. And so we just like kind of pretend to hide behind a story. And that is a kind of a Cain-like mentality that weakens our participation overall. And I think we're just like kind of constantly encouraged to frame ourselves like that. And then we're like peer pressured to performing a framework instead of like encouraged to act out a narrative or something like that. I don't know. Phrasing is tough, but I feel like there's some sort of something.
No, I like the way you put that. Yeah.
It's almost like a firefly. Do I have a lag? I must have a lag. I apologize. Is it what you're describing? Almost sounds like fight or flight, right? If there's something that I can't, that's unfamiliar to me, I interpret as a threat. So I react to it in some way, and it's to the point where it's maybe in a self-destructive way, in the form of depression. It's just, you're foreign to me, you're alien to me.
Yeah.
Does that make? And then part of it too is sunk cost fallacy. At what point do we look at something and say, "Boy, that was a mistake"? We just because we're so deep into it, we just keep doubling down and doubling down. We do it with our politics. We do it in our economics.
That requires some sort of cognitive flexibility. I think we tend to get so narrow-minded and we just get in these self-referential things that it's really hard to objectively step out and have that critical phase. Hey, am I making a mistake? Are my presuppositions leading me down the wrong way? Like we're not able to step out of frameworks and then step in frameworks and then step out of frameworks and then step in frameworks. We seem to either pick a framework and then go, or like kind of be indecisive and like, oh, I don't know what to do. There's too many choices. And so I'm with you, Mark. Like I think we do struggle to either have conviction or criticality. We can't navigate that harmoniously, and I do think that's a problem.
Well, to both your points, and like going back to that fight or flight and relating to what you said, C Money, the fight or flight is kind of you can think of it as a term, is a very direct, almost an instinctive response. But it's straightforward in that sense. But we forget about pause and freeze, and there's an actionable aspect of movement in fight or flight, but freeze and pause, what those things do is offer you a moment to take in what has come and evaluate it. There's a danger to that because fight or flight, there's generally a higher likelihood that you'll survive a negative experience or predator in the case of nature, but being able to freeze, being able to understand when you can freeze and when you have time to evaluate, having that perception of depth and distance and danger that allows you to pause for a moment and take in something unexpected or new, and to see what may be worthwhile in that new set of data that's coming in. Because you can think of it as little loops. It's like you make these little loops for yourself so that you don't have to think, so that you don't have to evaluate, so that you don't have to freeze. I'll just fight or I'll just fly. And that's real easy, that's convenient, that's comfortable. It's not productive in the long term, but there is a certain amount of comfort with just making little loops so that you don't have to use your brain. You don't have to take into account this unique individual that is confronting you in this way that you don't like. You don't have to take into account these new circumstances financially that you don't want to deal with. Just whatever it is, it can turn into a means of avoidance to not take the time
Absolutely.
to develop that ability to freeze well, I guess is.
Yeah, I think that tracks on to McGilchrist really well. The fight or flight is a known reaction. It's like you've determined the valence and you know whether to flee or whether to go. And then that freeze or that attend to is more of a right hemisphere opening to understanding, standing under, being submissive, relating to, and that's more of a faithful interaction of undetermined. And so what you were saying is there's something really comfortable about knowing what to do and then having a reaction to it versus being open to it, whatever. And so, yeah, I thought that was interesting. I think
it's not exclusively right hemisphere because there's an aspect of training the thing. You think about freezing well, like I was saying, like training the depth perception, understanding the dangers, learning about your environment. It's an openness, but there's a trainedness to it, so that you have an intuition as to when to freeze and when it's safe to freeze and when you can freeze. And so I think it comes down to, like, you have the extremes of fight or flight, but then you bring those two extremes in, and then you have that training and that openness, and that's the rhythm of the pendulum that I think is manageable, as opposed to fight or flight. It's train and try, train and try.
Yeah.
Very good. Nice talking to you guys. I got to split, but have fun. God bless.
Hey, Mark, I was a cobbler for 6 years. I heard you do some shoe stuff. We'll have to nerd out on that sometime.
Yeah, it's been a long time for me, but yeah, wow. That's unusual. You don't run into many shoemakers, cobblers anymore, but that's cool. Where you live?
I'm in northeast of Dallas in Texas.
Okay, so lots of cowboy boots then.
Yeah, lots of cowboy boots.
That's good. That's good. All right. Yeah, definitely. My email right there, Redlands Village Mark.
Let me write it down before you cut out.
Yep. One word, Redlands Village Mark @gmail.
Got it.
Good. All right, guys. Yeah, nice talking to you too, and good insights. Thanks, C Money, Alan, Gabriel. Have a good day.
Hey, Mark. Have a good day. I guess one thing I would add to this, though, is I agree with all these the system is, but you also need sort of fire breaks in that, because you can always you can always just be like, oh, well, this is better, and this is even better, and then this is even better. And, it's the cocaine feedback loop of like, oh, well, doing cocaine on Friday feels really good. Well, maybe I'll just do it on Friday and Saturday. And, there's little traps that pull you deeper and deeper, and the whole like 1970s tune in, turn on, drop out. Like everything your parents have told you is a lie. And it's really just them being reactionary and being, fighting against these outside forces. And then you get all the, this whole like feedback loop of like, oh, being more and more hedonistic is better and better and better. So just like there is a natural need to be whatever you want to call it, conservative or traditional or whatever, because
Yeah.
if you're just
I
always
think
like,
that's the subtlety of temptation. Like, yeah, I think
Of
you
what?
said that really well. Like, the subtlety of temptation of
what?
going the wrong way.
You cut out. Subtlety of what?
Temptation?
temptation. Yeah. Thank you.
Temptation? Sorry,
Yeah.
the signal's actually really bad. It's tough to know when to talk and when not to talk. Sorry if I cut you off there. But yeah, no, I think that's really good, because it's not like we are on the right path and then all of a sudden we're full of sin. It's like we do these one little micro steps and these one little micro steps and these one little micro steps, and we kind of assume that's an isolated one-off. But actually that alters your character, and that builds your character, and that changes your personality. And that really adds up and almost becomes like a possession at some point. And so I thought that was really interesting, Alan. I wanted to encourage you to keep going on that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's like, I mean, we think of these as like the exceptions, but I think the exceptions more and more become the rule, of like the idea of black swans. That's like a Nassim Taleb thing, but like the example would be like, well, riding a motorcycle is way cheaper than driving a car, and you're going to get there with, less gasoline and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, it's, the person riding a car might every day regret it, because they're like, well, mine, so expensive to have a car and all this stuff. But the day that, the motorcycle hits another car and the guy is splat on the highway, it's like, turns out that like the car is more durable. For 5 years, the person on the motorcycle looked like they were winning because they were saving money, and then they had the cool motorcycle, and all the girls wanted rides on the motorcycle. And then, in one moment, one car crash, the guy in the car's fine, maybe his neck is hurt, but the guy on the motorcycle is dead. So it's like, these systems that seem like, oh, well, I'm just slowly changing my values and I'm acclimating and I'm becoming more and more this way. All of a sudden, like, same with like, the drug, like being like, oh, party guy, it seems and everything's going well. And then next moment, you're, like completely addicted to drugs or gambling or whatever. All these feedback loops that are positive that drive you to do more and more. Then one day you wake up and it's like, uh-oh, I thought this thing was good and now it's bad. So it's like, where's the fire break? Where's the stopgap that prevents you from being like sucked down the primrose path?
I think a lot of that fire break goes back to the idea of honoring your father and mother. It's like, yeah, they weren't right about everything, but they inherited something that is your inheritance now, and you have to take that into account. And you can explore around those boundaries, but and again, there's always an aspect of risk if you're doing something revolutionary, and you can argue about whether or not it's worthwhile based on the outcome. It's like, do you live your whole life riding a motorcycle and you retire and hand it off, throw it away, or do you die young? So it's a hard thing to evaluate, but I think it's wise to consider what you've inherited as you make those decisions, and as you make a choice between those trade-offs that you have.
But and that, sorry, continue, Simon.
Yeah, sorry, it just works better with my camera off, I think. It's tough to balance the like literal familiar patterns, like the family and the pattern of a paternal father, with your creative present conscious moment. And so we're always kind of going through either the wisdom of the past or the foolishness of the past, or what was adaptive and helpful, or what was adaptive 50 years ago. And so we're always kind of oscillating back and forth between, those familiar patterns and then the present unknown, undeveloped potential. And that's a crucial place to be, pun intended. So it's interesting.
But then it just points out that we're right on that points you to like, you're not just your desires or like this one. You can't just segment yourself up of like, oh, well, this is the part of my brain that just wants dopamine hits, this is who I really am. or I am, I'm just my body, or I'm just, like, it's like these extended relationships permeate, and like, the wisdom of your grandma who told you a story, 50 years ago, and now she's long dead, it could save your life one day, but that information was stored up in her brain for you to have later. It's like,
Yeah, I
it's
think
the same thing
what
as the people.
does Vervaeke call it, like the separate sacred self or something like that? That part of you that's beyond your ego, and part of you that's beyond your rationality, that part of you that's influenced by genetics and the patterns and the culture and the unconscious. That kind of helps you get out of that egoic tyranny, or that narcissistic certainty, or that small-minded, limited, insufficient perspective. And so having that other archetypal persona or God image that is not personal kind of helps give you that ability to be critical or whatever. Yeah, I think that helps you improve your discrimination and your discernment, and helps you filter out the subtle nature of good and evil things.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Gabe.
All right. I kind of think of that in terms of kind of, I don't know, a lot of people use this word a lot of different ways, but kind of the logos. Like if you think of it as, if you have the right hemisphere and left hemisphere, and then it's sort of the corpus callosum between them. And there's, and that's sort of, you could think of it as the impersonal personal. It's something separate from you because you've inherited. It's an order of how things interact, how things go well. It's kind of like a marriage between a husband and a wife. There's a certain set of rules that you can follow that will make your marriage go well, and there's variety around how you express those rules, but generally speaking, you could narrow them down to things like communication and intimacy and shared goals and values and all those things. And you can start to think about how the two things connect, the opposites, the coordinated cooperative opposites that we are constantly balancing, how exactly they are coordinated. And then you can start to see the patterns in that. And I think that's tied pretty closely to the idea of conscience. And
yeah,
it's something outside yourself that is within you, but it is outside of you in the sense that you inherited it, but it's within you because it's the structure upon which it's built. And then you have those, you have that inside and outside built around that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's just the paradox of identity. Is are you an internal thing or are you an external thing? Are you an individual? Or are you a collective? Are you a memory of the past, or are you a projection to the future? Like that is kind of the absurdity of the human condition, is to be on these two poles of existence. And that is the inter-essay. Yeah.
I think you're both built around the structure of logos. And I know people don't always like the idea of structure or mechanisms or rules or things like that because it ties things down. But when I say things like that, I look at it in the sense of the way Karen Wong talks about limitations, providing the means for explosive creativity. It's like if you don't limit yourself in certain ways, then your creativity is going to end up very limited because you have nothing to push off of, to move against, to struggle with or problem solve around. And I feel like that thing in between those cooperative opposites is the logos of Christ as limitation that gives the foundation for variety and creativity. I might be getting a little abstract, but it's an idea I've wrestled with for a long time, just trying to understand the nature of the relationship between the inside and the outside, between the masculine and the feminine, and how that pattern, as Peugeot would like to say, how that pattern, you find it up and down all the different levels of relating to yourself and others.
I think the actual manifestation is generally a result of your aim. And so if you're trying to aim at some transcendent pattern that what do you call it? That's like non-physical, then you're aiming at something above you, and then what manifests as difference, what manifests into your conscious as difference is the polarity of opposites. And then in reference to the transcendent principle, then the descendant polar opposites give you that differentiation and meaning. And then the differentiation and meaning of the actual particulars, how that I don't know, relates to the wave-like transcendent thing that you're aiming at, then provides the context for meaning. And so, I don't know, that's at least what I was thinking while you were talking. I know you got a little bit lost, and then I tried to get lost on top of your loss. But did that make sense?
No, it's all right. No, listening to you talk, C-Money, you're definitely thinking around a lot of the things that I've been playing with. So at some point, I'd like to, if you have the opportunity at some point, I'd like to connect on, or at least send you some of the stuff I've been doing to just get an outside perspective on it, because I can always do that.
Definitely.
So.
Definitely.
Are you on X?
Yeah. Do you have Luke's number? Like, have Luke text me your number or something, and we'll chat.
I have his email, so we'll sort it out.
Okay.
Hey, sorry, Alan. We weren't trying to talk around you.
Oh yeah. Oops.
But yeah, no. We'll probably. I gotta get out there and help my wife with the kids, but
yeah. Let's finish this up, and I'll reach out, and let's chat. Let's catch up sometime soon, man.
Yeah, I'd love to dig into that stuff. Sounds good. Well, thanks, Luke, for letting us use your channel.
All right, for sure, man. Have a good one.
Sounds good. Later.